You need somebody to tell you this. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Let me repeat myself. If you cannot do it, you can't do it.
Season whistle, whistle. Season whistle, whistle.
What's up? This is Dominique Beaumonte, and you are listening to Season with Salt, the podcast. Recently, I was in a discussion with somebody, and initially I could do it. It was a spear of the moment. What is the word? It was more of an emotional response. Somebody asked me to do something, and in the moment it made sense. It seemed like a really good opportunity. And it was really difficult for me to deny it, but I did want to get feedback from other folks, but I gave sort of a temporary, I can do it. When I circled back with other folks, they asked me some important questions. And for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to use some examples of questions that they asked me. Does this make sense for you? Is this in alignment with who you are called to be? Do you have time for this? Is this something that you would do for free? Is this something that you care about? If you don't do this, is life going to be over? Who's going to benefit from this? Are you going to benefit from this? I mean, the questions are really endless. So after the person posed a few questions, and those are just examples, not necessarily the questions, but after the person posed those kinds of questions to me, it really caused me to start thinking about my worth. So I hit the person back up and I said, you know what? I thought about it and I gave a premature yes without essentially counting the cost. I'm going to go back to the drawing board to do a deeper dive into whether I can do this or not. And then I'll get back to you. Well, I did that. And what I realized was I could do it. I could still do it. But I couldn't do it in the way that I was requested to do it. The way that I was requested to do it put some limitations on me. It put a dollar value on my potential and capacity, and I realized I could do it, but on my terms, not on the person's terms. So I went back and I told the person, I can do it, but here are my terms for doing it. If you are unable to meet my terms, then I can't do it. The person came back and said to me, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Really was hoping that you would be able to do it. You gave a preliminary yes, and here are all the things that are weighing on your yes. Here are all the people that will be impacted on my end. Here's what a no would mean. And so they went through all this stuff. And as I was listening to them go through the things that matter to them, I realized that what mattered to them was not my problem. Because if all the things that they mentioned were true, then they would take a deeper consideration to the things that I said that I would need in order for my then no to become a yes. And so I listened and I said, my no is going to be a no, and it can be a yes, but on my terms. And essentially, the person heard me and reevaluated their position, and everybody's needs were met. That's an example of being able to do it, but not being able to do it if the terms aren't right. But what I realize is that there are some things that you could do, but you can't do. You learn that you can't do it after you have committed to being able to do it. And in the world that we live in, a lot of people say, well, if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, then you have low integrity, or you're lying, or you're being dishonest. And I appreciate that. I want to be a person of my word. I want to be a person that does what I say that I'm going to do. But then there are other elements, particularly in our personal lives, our spiritual lives, our journey to self-care, where we want to do it and it makes sense to do it. But the things that we need in order to do it aren't in place. And it becomes more of a detriment to say yes than to say no. And sometimes we are so invested in showing up a certain way that we spend more time and money and resources in our own internal capacity to be a yes, and really it's a no. Another thing that I'm thinking about, there are some systems, and if you're like, I'm assuming that if you're listening to this, you might be a person like me, you're attached to systems. I identify as a high achiever. I believe that if I'm involved in something, I'm giving it 110%. But there are some systems that will use you if they know that that's how you feel and that's how you operate. And there will come a time in just about every relationship, particularly professional, civically, there will come a time in relationships where you have to assess whether the relationship is mutually beneficial. And what used to be a yes will have to become a no when the thing on the line is your sanity, the thing on the line is your integrity, the thing on the line is your self-worth. People stay in jobs for many, 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 many years because they feel loyal to a system that, if we're being honest, sometimes it's almost impossible for a system to be loyal to you. A friend of mine was telling me that her partner was very close to retirement at a company that he had been at for over 10 years, and that he got laid off at just almost so close to retirement, laid off. He was loyal to a system that did not have the capacity, the resources to be loyal to him. And sometimes we realize our worth too late, right? We say, oh, like, I should have left earlier, or I should have applied for jobs earlier, or I should have raised my number earlier, whatever it might be. And we end up being milked by a system. And when I say milked, I mean our capacity, our time, our energy, and all that. And so I'm not saying be a person that says yes and then says no later. I'm saying be a person, especially if you're like me, where you have, like, I tend to have very emotional responses to things if they are in line with my passion. Example, I care about children and youth and young adults. And sometimes all the time, my answer is generally yes. Sometimes my yes does not align with my capacity. And it's hard to give a no in a moment. And so you end up saying yes. And in your heart and your mind, you say, I'll figure it out on the back end. I'll figure it out. I'll find a way. And then you end up failing yourself in the long run because you don't have the capacity. Your yes is padded by nothing, right? So you just go back and say, you know what? I'm sorry. I wasn't able to get the information that I promised or do the thing that I said I was going to do. I think we should all consider that, right, when we say yes. And what are other ways to say, well, let me put it like this. There gotta be ways for us to say yes and no in the same space. Being non-definitive sometimes gives us the space to evaluate whether we really can do something. Um, I identify as a graphic designer, and in the spaces that I occupy, people know that and they want me to do graphic for them. The reality is, I don't have time to do random graphic design. It's really 50% my process and 50% working with other people, right? My process, it takes me a long time to think about designs and to feel comfortable with what I create. And then sometimes people are very specific about what they want, and you have to go back and forth with them. You have to make corrections and you have to do all this stuff. I don't have time for that. But what I found myself doing is saying yes because of the relationship that I have with the person and not yes because I have the capacity. And so, in considering that, I've had to say to myself, you need to say no because your no benefits both the person that has the request and you, because you're not going to have the ability to give the person your best work, your best self, your best attention in the way that you want to, and and you're not going to be proud of what you're doing with them. So even though it's hard to say no sometimes, it's better to say no in the long run. So I just thought I'd share that because I've had to say no in the last week a couple of times, and I'm like, ooh, that didn't feel good. And even after I've said no sometimes, I thought, maybe I can do it. Maybe I can try. And people will make you feel bad about not being able, right? Like, anticipate that. If you get in the work of saying no, people will make you feel like you owe them a yes when you don't really owe them a yes. You just can't do it. And you got to be comfortable saying no. And your no just has to mean no. And be careful not to pad your no with like some other possibility. Like, I can't do it today, but I'll let you know tomorrow. If you can't do it today, like, then you can't do it, right? Like, because that person will then be depending on your yes in the future when you don't have the capacity. You can just say no. I had a person a couple of weeks ago send me 6 emails. I know they're not gonna listen to this podcast, so I'm just gonna talk about them, with these graphic design requests. And they weren't requesting really anything. They were telling me what they wanted me to do. And I told the person, I am not able to do this. Unfortunately, the way that my life is set up right now, I'm running an organization. I'm trying to be a committed youth pastor. I'm trying to have a little social life here and there. I like to get on a plane here. I can't do this. And the reality is, if I did the 6 projects that you requested, the resources I would get from it wouldn't be enough to even sustain what I like doing. So my no had to be no. The person was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll just hit you up next week." No, no, no. My this week no is also my no for next week. I don't have the capacity to do this, and it's a gift to you and to me. I'm gifting myself with more time to commit to the things that I prioritize, and I'm gifting you with the opportunity to get the best possible work that you need done from somebody that has the time to do it. We both benefit from my no. All right. I think that's enough. I'm going to say a word of prayer because we have we live in a culture where people make you feel like you have to do something. I've had people say, you need to say yes to this because this is important for your future, or the way that this person views you, or your profession, or the possibility of doing this, or these doors will be open if you say yes. Whatever door God has for you to walk through, it's not tied to you being manipulated by somebody to say yes. Period. If it's for you, it's for you. If it's in God's plan for your life, it's going to happen. It's not connected to somebody else's manipulation. And I learned that this week because somebody tried that on me. And I was just like, okay. I said no. Father, help us to know when to say no and when to say yes. And give us peace when we have to say no. And help us not to backtrack. And help our yeses and our nos to be aligned with your will for us and not our own need to be affirmed or to be liked or loved or to be known as a person that comes through. If we can't do it, God, help us to say no and to prioritize what is important. In Jesus' name, amen.
Season with salt, with salt.